Hello everyone, and welcome back to JAS Reviews. My name is James, and today I'm going to be doing a movie review of the film Gretel and Hansel, directed by Perkins and starring Sophia, Lillis, among others. I was actually pretty interested in this film when I saw the trailers for it. Now, January horror films can be a bit of a hit and miss situation. There have been some years when there have been some really good early horror movies, but some years there have been some really bad ones. But I was a little hopeful of this one, especially when I found out that Oz Perkins was the director of the movie The Black Coat's Daughter. I think Oz Perkins has a really good hand on atmospheric horror. I appreciated that the movie didn't rely on jump scares too much either. Instead, letting the atmosphere deliver the scares, and there was even an interesting story to boot. So I was excited to see what his next directorial feature would be. I was a little confused as to why they switched the names of Hansel and Gretel from the classic fairy tale, and there's even a little bit of a controversy around that, which I don't really think the controversy was all that necessary, to be honest. And I was fine with the name switch. That did not bother me, and I really think it got way too much negative traction, which I think made the movie's negative scores a little higher than it probably would have been. But unfortunately, I don't think this movie is good as a whole. In fact, I really didn't enjoy it overall, which is very disappointing to me considering how much I actually did enjoy The Black Coat's Daughter. And man, there was some potential to this movie. Let me start with the positives of it. I think first off, visually this movie is gorgeous to look at. I mean, there are some really good shots here. Just some really eye-popping ones that feel like they could have come out of a A24 film, to be honest. I was that impressed with some of them. And some of the shots really were striking to look at and were just sort of interesting. And there was even one or two that sort of unsettled me with how they were shot, especially with the lighting. There was this really cool scene in like a carriage with blue lighting that really gave a pretty unnerving shot of the witch character in the movie. But the thing is, visuals can only take you so far. I think the visuals sort of have to mean something in order for them to really have any sort of effect on the viewer. And my biggest problem with the visuals in this movie was that they really just felt like they were there to be scary and not really advance the story anymore. I feel like some of the visuals had a point though, especially the ones with the witch where they were making her look unsettling. But the visuals wasn't really where my problem lied with this movie. Almost all of its biggest problems come from the pretty bad writing and the pretty bad acting. I don't know. I feel like you could do something more interesting with this fairy tale. I mean, there's got to be something more interesting to do with this fairy tale. This movie is barely an hour and a half long, but still, for some reason, it feels longer than that. I think it's because the movie just really loses steam at some point. There was especially this beginning 20 minutes of the movie where they're trying to establish our two main characters, and there were already red flags in the beginning 20 minutes of the movie because neither of the main characters are particularly interesting. And the reason they give for them leaving their parents' home is super vague. And there's also this really weird scene at the beginning where they get attacked by this creature. I don't want to spoil too much about it, but they get attacked by this creature, and it feels so random because this creature never appears again. It's just there, and then the scene is over. I'm really not sure why that scene had to be there. And they also meet this hunter character who helps them out for a brief time. That's not a spoiler because that was in one of the trailers. The hunter sort of talks about the witch even. But I don't know if the hunter really needed to be a character. He just felt very unnecessary as a whole. But the biggest problem with this movie, I mean, it comes when they meet the witch. There are some elements here that are the strong elements of the movie, but this is where the movie gets really weak, is when they get to the witch's house, unfortunately. Like I said, there are some interesting visuals at the beginning when they're at the witch's house, and even some great ones, especially when they introduce this witch character. I mean, it is sort of legitimately unsettling, and I think that is due to the legitimately pretty good performance by Alice Krige. She's the only performance here that really impressed me in any way. I think she has some awful lines to deliver, because the lines in this movie are pretty cheesy or feel very on the nose and very obvious in what they're trying to say. But I think she did pretty good at delivering them, and she felt pretty convicting. So I liked when she was on screen. Let's go ahead and talk about the other performances of the film, since I'm on that subject, actually. Sophia Lillis as Gretel is really not that great. In fact, she's pretty dull overall. I guess there were some points when she was okay, but I mean, her performance didn't really get any sort of reaction out of me. And I'm just not sure if that's her fault overall, because I feel like director Oz Perkins didn't give this character much to do. You'd think he'd have a reason for making her the main character. And at first, I will admit, at first I could see where they were going with her character, but what they did with her eventually just didn't really make much sense to me. It felt like a very confusing character arc, because it seems like her whole character is about protecting her brother and about caring for him when no one else would. But they sort of changed that around the middle of the movie, and I'm not sure why. Samuel Leakey as Hansel, I mean, he wasn't good. Like, you typically expect weak performances out of a child anyway, and he wasn't that good. But once again, I don't know if it was entirely his fault, because he had some bad lines to deal with. I think he had some of the most awkward, easily, of the movie. I think his manner of speaking it didn't sound to me like how a child would speak, in my opinion. It sounded very adult. So, I don't know why he had just such fancy lines and fancy dialogue. It just didn't seem to fit right for him. And I don't think he had great chemistry with Gretel. I mean, I could tell that both actors were trying to have some sort of connection, but I didn't really feel that sibling connection. It didn't really grasp me in the way that I hoped it would. And that should grasp the viewer, because that's the main emotional point of the movie. That's what's supposed to be the main emotional point, is the brother and sister relationship. But it just feels awkward more than anything. Let me talk a little bit more about the storytelling aspects of this movie. Like I said, I feel like the movie was starting one way, then it ends up another way, and it just becomes a bit of a mess. Especially what they do with Hansel. I don't know where they were trying to go with his character. I mean, at one point, they're making him believe the witch, then another moment they're making him doubt the witch, and then he's becoming the opposer to the witch, while with Gretel, it seems like it would make more sense for her to maybe be the one consistently doubting the witch, because she is the older, wiser individual, but instead, she becomes the individual who starts believing in the witch a little more until it's almost too late, which is really stupid to me. It seems like it should be the other way around, like the naive young child should be the one that is being enraptured by the witch, not Gretel. I don't know, that just seems like a wrong characterization choice to me, but maybe that's a personal nitpick, I don't know. Some people might feel differently on that, but that to me just really irked me more than almost anything else in the film. Another thing that irked me was how the film was shot. Almost everything was shot in the center. Like, every shot was a center shot, with a character being in the center, or you focusing on something in the center, and it was also shot, for some reason, in an aspect ratio. I'm not really sure why they did this film in a weird aspect ratio. It didn't really seem to have much point, other than to have the viewer say, oh wow, that looks cool. Not every shot needs to be a center shot, because not everything in the movie is going to be important enough to be placed in the center. I think some interesting angles could have helped this movie look even more interesting. And there are also some points where they inexplicably do a shaky cam thing where they're following the characters walking and they're shaking the camera like a found footage film. And those shots really bother me. I'm not really sure what they were trying to do with those besides maybe make it seem like it had stylistic flair to it, but it really felt disconnected when almost every other shot in the film was very static and very still. You had one or two extremes in this film as far as camera movement. You either had very static or super shaky and unnecessarily so. Unfortunately, there wasn't a lot to say about this movie. It's a very, unfortunately, basic horror movie. I mean, the shots, the visuals in it are really good, but when the visuals don't really mean that much and they seem constantly pretentious, it just doesn't do much for me, and the movie isn't even that scary. I was really hoping for better from this movie. I thought it might be an actual decent January film, but instead, it's pretty bad. I'm going to give it a 1.5 out of 5 stars, and obviously not a very high recommendation. I suppose if you're interested to see what an adaptation of Hansel and Gretel might look like in a slightly darker universe, you may get that here, but for me, I don't know. I just didn't buy into this vision. I didn't think it worked. Yeah, that's my review of Gretel and Hansel. If you disagree with me, feel free to do so. This review is just my opinion. Feel free to leave your thoughts about the movie in the comments below. I would love to have a conversation about it and just see what you all thought. And if you like what I'm doing, feel free to like this video and to subscribe to my channel. And with that, I will see you all in the next video.